You're listening to the Dead Padawan Society, a science fiction and fantasy podcast celebrating the ideas, mythologies, and truths in iconic works of science fiction. I'm your host, Brett Inman, joined by my friend...
Nick Dennis.
Hey, man!
Hey, Brett. How's it going?
Another week. It's going great. I'm glad I don't live in a dystopia, aren't you?
I am very glad it's just a normal society. Not even a utopia, just normal.
Just normal society.
But especially not a dystopia.
Incredibly refreshing.
Yeah. So, spoiler, not really, but this is what we're talking about. It's dystopias today.
Yeah.
And we're talking specifically about Children of Men.
Which has been a lot of fun. I had not seen it before prepping for this episode, so I'm looking forward to talking about it.
I had seen it, I can't even remember when, many years ago, and didn't think much of it at the time that I saw it. I mean, not that I was like, meh, but, you know, it was a good movie, but I hadn't really dived into thinking about it other than just a cool sci-fi movie.
Yeah. And
this time on rewatch, I actually watched it twice recently because I wanted to go back and even think about some specific things even more. And I'm like, man, this is just good. Mm-hmm. It's really good work.
I completely agree.
And very dense. That's why I felt like I needed to hit that second watch because like, man, this sucker is just so dense with... small things here and there and different focuses that I wanted to key in on and think about. It's good stuff. But before we get to that, let's go over our latest obsessions. What are you obsessed with right now, Brett?
I was just introduced by a friend of mine, Daniel Spear, who we've mentioned before. I think every episode we just need to have a shout out to Daniel Spear because he's an awesome guy.
He pays us for it.
We just recently had a game night and he introduced us to a game called Drop Mix. It's made by Harmonix, the same guys who did, or same team who did the Rock Band Guitar Hero games. So it's like rhythm-based games. But Drop Mix lets you play out the role of being a DJ and using different like parts of music and different tracks to create new pieces of music. And so it's really, really cool.
Now, is this with a TV? Like a screen?
You use a phone or a tablet,
and
that goes in the device, and then it has a deck of cards that all have chips in them, and there's a card reader, and so you put in these different cards to play parts of songs. So it could be the vocals, could be leading tracks, could be rhythm or bass, that kind of stuff. So it's really awesome, and it's got several modes on it that let you... Because Daniel loves to just play it freestyle, and he'll just be like, what's the coolest mix I can make? And half the cards, I don't know what the songs are, so I'm like, I don't know what this is going to sound like. So the actual play modes kind of force you to try things out and get more and more familiar with the tracks that are included. And there's kind of some puzzliness to it where it encourages you to play certain colors of cards or things like that. But it's a really fun game. It was super different than anything that I've played before. So
then what is the objective? Is it cooperative or versus?
There are several different modes. You can play it. There's a solo mode where the app is actually giving you a combination of cards that you have to play. And part of it that's interesting, you actually have to manage the intensity of the music, so you really kind of want to like build up, which is cool. Like that makes sense. So there are some songs that have, are a little more low key and less energy, and you gradually work from those lower key, like lower energy songs up to higher energy songs, and that's one of the things that you're trying to do. And then manage your hand, try to get into your deck and get more cards that you can play. There's also a competitive mode where the cards that you play represent points. And if you can take over the entire board with your cards, that's additional points. And then sometimes if you can play a certain type of card, like if, you can play a vocal track or you can play the rhythm at some point, then you get an additional bonus on top of the points for playing the card.
Okay.
And so you're kind of playing back and forth. And then there's an element, too, where you can kind of zonk the other person where you can remove their cards or give them penalties, which is kind of interesting.
Okay. So that's similar to Rock Band in that you get points for accomplishing that sound.
Yeah, and even in that, there's a cooperative version of that where you're playing with somebody else against another team. And so it's neat. It's very different.
So is it just on one phone, or do you all like get your phones out?
Yeah, everybody's just using the one screen.
Oh, okay.
So
That's interesting. What's it called again?
Drop Mix.
Drop Mix. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, he was able to pick it up. I think Best Buy maybe was running on a discount, but picked it up, and they've continued to release more decks of cards so you can kind of expand what you have to pull from. One that's really, really interesting, he got the vocal track from the Dolly Parton song Jolene. And it's amazing whenever you're like throwing that in with some like, old funk or soul, and it works. You're like, what is this?
That's really cool.
Yeah, it also, one thing that was pretty cool, it will adjust the key and tempo so that everything is playing at the same time. So, for instance, if you have a song that's in a major key, then it will shift it to a minor key if everything else is in minor. And so you get to hear things.
That's
cool.
Like,
that's really similar, but you get to hear that kind of slightly different shift on them.
Well, that's nice, too, because my immediate thought going into it is, like, I'm going to screw this up. Like, it's not going to sound right. It's going to be in a different
absolutely.
Key, or the rhythm is not going to match up. But it's intuitive and automatically, like, drops it in at the right placement, slows it down, speeds it up, and all that.
Yeah, it's a super fun game. It was really addictive to play it that evening. So
that's really cool. Yeah, I want to try that out.
What have you been into?
Free Chick-fil-A.
Really? Well, who isn't into free Chick-fil-A?
Yeah, it's so there was a new one opening up by my house, and it's so funny. Like, fast food restaurants are just fast food restaurants, but there's something about Chick-fil-A's that people just go nuts for these suckers. Which I good chicken. I'll give you that, but I'm not like so crazy about having to go get Chick-fil-A. But they do this thing that whenever they open a new one, the first 100 people get Chick-fil-A free for a year, and this sucker's right by my house. It's only 2-minute drive from where we live.
So when you say Chick-fil-A free for a year, what does that mean?
It's 52 meals, so it's one a week. And so it's 52 number one meals, but it's the whole like drink and
that's pretty sweet.
Fries. It's not just like a sandwich.
That's
yeah.
Great.
And you get 52 of them, and you can use them whenever. You don't have to wait like week to week. And so anyway, I was like, I'm going to do this. But it's not just you show up there the day of opening. It's like a camp out where you have to be there 24 hours before, and you got to stay the whole time, which I knew that. Like, I knew that going in, and I actually took a day off work to do this. And went there, like, got a tent, like, borrowed a tent from a friend, got set up there, and did the whole...
So do you actually sleep on the premises?
Yeah.
Oh, that's weird.
They do these, like, checks throughout the day. You get a number, and you have to do these lineups and checks throughout the day to where they make sure you're still there so that you don't just... sign in and leave. And so they do that, but then at night they do like one last check, and then they let you sleep through the night. But I went on it was the hottest day of August. That it just happened to be that day. It was over 100 degrees.
That's awful.
And it was miserable. And I about noon 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
I was sitting there in a camping chair, hating myself, being like, why did I do this?
But now
This is the dumbest thing ever. I hate this. I hate all these people. I hate the fun guy that they brought, because they have a fun guy who is supposed to like keep energy up through the whole thing, and so he's like playing games.
That would be terrible.
Doing trivia, and
just leave me alone.
I know. But the thing is I was so tired because I got up super early. To get there at 6, get all my stuff there at 6 a.m. So you had to even be there earlier than that to make sure you got a spot. And which means I woke up at like 4:30, got there and set up. And so by midday, I was like, I'm tired, but I can't go in my tent and sleep or I'll just sweat and die. And so
Chick-fil-A needs to rethink their procedure for this during summer openings in the South, is what you're telling me.
I was like, I would never do this again unless it was in fall. Because I was thinking, no, not even winter. I don't want to be out here in the cold either.
Oh, that would be awful. I wonder if any of them have opened.
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh,
I'm sure there have been.
Oh,
but I was just like, I hate this. But at the end of it, I did get 52 free meals, and
So you've eaten them all already, right?
we've eaten several. I'm not gonna lie, this was like a week and a half ago, and I think we've been 3 times.
Wow.
But that sucker's hopping. It's a ton of people
Yeah.
there. But there's something about it that we're like, it's free. Let's go get it. Forget making food.
Yeah, I can understand that.
We're not going to do that tonight.
Well, let's be real. There are nights whenever we get home, and even though we don't have free meals, we're just like, it'd be easier to go get something. Let's just go
Right?
do it. So for it to be free, I mean, there's no barrier.
Right, yeah. I did that today. Like, we were leaving work. My wife came, and we were leaving work. And she was like, do you just want to get something? And we could have got Chick-fil-A, but we didn't. And so I was like, yeah, because I've got too much things to do today. I can't do this. I had to come back for the podcast.
Right.
So
I'm glad your priorities were in the right place.
Right.
Like, don't spend time with your wife and child
No.
and have a family meal. No, come in and record the podcast.
no, we're going through a drive-through and peace.
Yep. See ya.
I'm out. But yeah, so I don't know if that's a latest obsession. My obsession is going and getting this food now because I stinking
You've earned it?
feel like I've earned it. But doing that day, I can't really recommend it to anybody. But if you got a day to burn and you've got skin to burn,
Oh.
totally go and do that first 100 event that they got. Yeah.
Man, respect.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that. I don't think anyone should respect me for this.
It's a shameful thing that you've done.
Right. It was actually kind of a lame thing too. I didn't tell anyone in my department what I was doing. I was like, I told my manager,
Took
I'm
a
like,
personal day?
I was like, can I have this day off? She didn't ask what for. And so I didn't say what for because I was
Oh,
like,
man, that's great.
if I tell people this, are they going to be like, you're such a weirdo? Just buy your food.
Actually, had you told them, everyone else in the department would have been there suffering along with you because people are fanatic about their Christian chicken.
Right. I know that sucker is like a religious experience for people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, so I've got free chicken.
Yeah, so you said that wasn't exactly your obsession. What has your latest obsession been?
I've been obsessed with this con that we're going to very soon. Actually, by the time that this episode comes out, we'll have already been. But right now, it's coming up this next weekend, and it's the ICCC con here in Nashville, Tennessee. It's the Imperial Commissary Collectors Convention, and it's
Is that enough C's for you?
That's a lot of C's, but they are having this first. I think this is the first con that they're having here. Got a special guest coming, like William Shatner,
Which is super exciting. I've seen him before. You
I've
haven't.
never seen the man in flesh, and so I'm super excited to see the Shat.
He is 100% worth if any of our listeners ever get a chance to see that man on stage. He's incredibly entertaining. Like,
Is he
the
really?
larger-than-life personality that he conveys is completely real.
I hope we get into whatever like
Event
hall
that-
or event that he's doing, because I know there's the meet and greet and the signing, of course, that the stars do. But I just want to see him. If I can see him with my own 2 eyes and hear him a little bit, that'll be enough for me.
The thing
That'd
that
be
stands out
awesome.
to me, he is a great storyteller. And so I'm just hoping that, even if it's just some random personal story about his life, it will be the most entertaining story you've ever heard.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay. I've seen him in clips, obviously, and I could kind of tell that already that he's not shy in front of a crowd. He can own a crowd pretty easy. Because he even sings and stuff like that. So he's
what
very
you call that?
comfortable. And stuff like that.
no, it's the singing.
He does the
Is
sing.
that the word that you use for that?
What else? He sings.
He usually just talks the songs, though, doesn't he? Because
Does he really?
I want to say whenever he did, I think he maybe did Bowie's Space Oddity whenever he was with us, like, ground control to Major Tom. Like, he just talks the song, like, he speaks the song more than sings it.
Well, I want to
really.
see that too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, there's him, and there's many other guests. I'm really excited about seeing him, and also Steve Sansweet, because this is a collector's con. So it's focused on figures and vintage toys, collectibles, and all kinds of, I'm sure it's going to be crazy wide range of stuff. But Steve Sansweet is the biggest Star Wars collector in the world. He doesn't own it anymore because it's a nonprofit. He switched to a nonprofit, but Rancho Obi-Wan in California, it's like a Star Wars mecca to go out there, because he has literally the biggest collection ever, and stuff that is completely unique that no one has.
Oh, wow.
Like one of his big items he has, I think, is the banner from the first con, like before Star Wars ever came out. They just had a simple booth of, this is Star Wars, come check us out. And there was a banner that was made for it in the old, it's not in the standard Star Wars font, it's in that thin, really thin font. And but he has that banner hanging up, which I have no idea how much that's worth, but it's got to be astronomical.
Yeah.
But he's got like the mail away Boba Fett's, he's got bunch of fan art and tailored pieces. Got a giant Jabba the Hutt and everything out there. I'd love to go see it. But he's also like the biggest. He's the biggest collector, but he's also like the biggest tank of knowledge on Star Wars collecting as well. Yeah. He's written thick books about everything that there is for it.
Should we get a box of just random custom Star Wars things that we've made and see if he'll accept any of them into the collection
that we just make?
Yeah,
like, that we just, this is a custom piece.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
You'd be like, I'll give you 1,000 for that.
We'll see. I'm just thinking, just get him to take it. You know, if we got some like Crayola model magic and made a Porg, could we get him to take that as part of the collection?
Right? Yeah, I would. Yeah, don't even get paid. Just if it was there and know that I have something in that collection, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
But it has to be. I've seen some of the custom pieces.
He's got standards.
Those suckers are nice. Like there's like really nice woodwork and custom dolls that people have made that are very, very good. Like
I make a pretty mean yarn doll. So
hey, there you go. You could do that little doll that Rey has in her shack there on Jakku. The little X-Wing pilot guy. You can make one of those.
That'd be great.
I bet he'd take it.
I'm sure he would.
Yeah, but I don't know exactly what he's going to be doing at it. I'm sure he'll do a panel, but I would love to meet him as well. That'd be really great. But that's coming up, and we're actually going. We're gonna do some reporting there. We're gonna hopefully film some stuff so that we'll put it up online and people can see it. But it's a con that's just starting out, so it's very much grassroots. The guy who started it. And
he's a Nashville local, right?
He's a Nashville local.
Which is great. People here are trying to do things.
Right, that it's not just a con company coming to the city, but it's local. And I feel like the standards will be high and the quality will be high because of that, because it is in your hometown. And I've seen it being publicized everywhere, so I think it's going to draw a pretty good crowd. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to that.
Cool.
What else do you got going on?
Well, I just had a birthday.
Happy birthday!
Hooray! So that was my birthday this year, 32.
32.
32 years. Was great. It was an awesome day. I have a 1-year-old, and I have the best wife in the world, and so it was a very low-key birthday. Now, like I said, I have a 1-year-old. He turns 1 a week and a half before my birthday, and so we have established a tradition this year. We're going to decorate for his birthday and leave it up till my birthday. And it's great. It's awesome.
So whatever his theme is your theme.
Yeah, so if he wants some stupid like Paw Patrol or something, I'm going to be like, no, it's got to be Ninja Turtles. Come back to me with some Star Wars. Like, you got to...
You're like, I have standards.
We got to meet in the middle on this.
Right.
Yeah. Whatever, Caillou is no. That's just a firm no.
Oh, so what was his birthday theme?
Well, there really wasn't a theme. Whenever you're 1, you don't have a lot of taste
it's
in things.
one birthday.
It was birthday themed. That's
There you go.
So we had the happy birthday banner, generic from Dollar Tree, and we had it was all generics. Maybe that was the theme. It was a generic birthday.
There you go.
We did a smash cake with him, which was a lot of fun. And so we had left like party hats and the banner up, and we had to take the tablecloth because he had gotten stuff all over it. But yeah, so I got to I had this is the first time in decades that I've had a birthday with decorations. It was great.
Your wife didn't tell you, but she actually just his smash cake and then the rest of the cake she just mushed all back together.
It was a weird shape, and then
she iced
re-iced
back over it.
it.
She's like, "Here's your birthday cake."
Yeah, I cut into it, and it kind of oozed out. I was like, this doesn't seem right.
They're like, why? It's not layered. It's just like mixed.
Clumps of cake.
It's like, I like it. This is cool.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Happy birthday, honey.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it was really great. I'm actually drinking right now out of a mug that I got from my wife with pictures of us
of y'all on
from
it.
summer. So
is Keaton saying anything yet?
He says mama and dada, but it's very inconsistent. Like sometimes he means us and sometimes he just uses those to refer to anything. And so it's we definitely think he's used those to talk about us, which is cool. Other than that, we've tried to teach him a few little basic signs, but he's very much his own man already. He's like, you look stupid doing that. I'm not going to do it. And so he's like, do you not? Okay, I get that you're trying to, this hand motion that you're making is supposed to communicate more. But look, my raising my arms up and screaming communicates the same thing. You learn my sign. I'm not learning yours.
Yeah, it's like the screaming. You do it for everything. You got to change it up. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know what you mean. I've started doing that. I'm like, use language. I don't know what you're saying. I don't understand.
And he's like, I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah, we're basically just shouting that back and forth at each other with.
Yeah. Well, next year, man, he'll be singing you happy birthday.
Yeah. This
That'll
year
be
he
a
didn't
huge-
do anything. He barely acknowledged me. He was like, "Oh, it's your birthday." I
Like-
just had one of those.
He's like, it's not my birthday. So, yeah, man, he'll be next year.
Yeah.
He'll be singing you happy birthday. That'll be nice.
Yeah, he did dance along whenever I sang the happy birthday song to myself, which is kind of sad to think about. But he danced along until I got to the end, and I'm like, happy birthday to Daddy, happy birthday to me. And he was like, whenever I said Daddy, he's like, oh, you're not singing that to me? He's
like,
he
whoa,
kind
whoa,
of
whoa.
dropped out. Yeah.
A week ago, this was my song.
Yeah.
You can't just take my song.
Dad, you're ruining the lyrics to this song. I know how this goes. It says happy birthday to Keaton.
Yes.
Happy birthday to me. It's Daddy. That's a wrong word.
Nice. Well, happy returns. Happy birthday.
Yeah. It's been 32 years since I was born. So glad to have been born.
Yeah, it's nice to be born.
It is nice to be born.
Yeah.
And then to have other people in your life be born, and
Yeah, and for that to just continue on.
and there not to be any kind of worldwide plague.
Sweet segue into what we're talking about today. So we are going to be talking about Children of Men this episode. It came out in 2006. It was co-written and directed by Alfonso Cuarón. Am I saying that right? Cuarón?
Cuarón, I think.
Close. Anyway, and it's based on the P.D. James novel of the same name. When this came out, it bombed. Did you know that?
Well, I hadn't heard of it.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Like most good sci-fi, it bombed. It didn't make much. Same thing we talked about with Moon a few weeks back. That, a lot of good sci-fi doesn't make big waves usually.
because audiences are the worst. The Iron Giant was the same thing.
Yeah.
Everything we've talked about has been a bomb.
Yeah, that has been true.
We should change our name to the Critical Failure Podcast.
I guess so. But yeah, it's like, this is why we can't have nice things, because no one goes. Mm-hmm. But I will say it failed, because I read up on it. It failed a lot due to poor marketing or mismarketing. They didn't know what to do with this film.
Yeah.
And when it came out, but anyway, it made 70 million, but its budget was 76 million. And that's just production. And so marketing is on top of that. And so, yeah, it was at a loss, which is very sad because it is a masterpiece. Mm-hmm. It is an incredible film.
Fortunate the people involved still were able to move on to other projects afterwards. I mean,
yeah,
Cuarón has done amazing work.
Right. His follow-up
his cinematographer, same thing.
Yeah, he's actually coming out because he had Gravity, and I didn't. It's so funny because I knew this, but I hadn't thought about it before he did this. Warner Brothers came and wanted him to do, and he did the Harry Potter movie, the third one, which is so funny because I knew that, but then I wasn't connecting that it was him, and I was like, that's so weird to think about him doing that. He also did the little. Not The Little, but A Little Princess. Do you remember that movie in the 90s?
Vaguely. I think that's probably one my sister saw.
So, well, see, I have 3 sisters, and so we watched that sucker. And it's great. Like, it is a great movie. I remember as a boy really liking that movie. And then I found out, I was like, he's the same director? That's so cool.
He was a producer on Pan's Labyrinth. So
was he
he's
really?
Got a connection there too. Yeah,
that makes sense with him and Guillermo. They're very much they're beautiful cinematography, great film directors. Yeah. That's cool that they've gotten to work together.
They also, I think, have the Mexico connection. So
right, yeah, they have that in their background. Which he's doing a new film, a black and white film that's coming out. I forgot the name of it. I think it's this year, but it's already getting Oscar buzz. Like people are going nuts over it. It just dropped a trailer a week or so ago, and I'm like, this looks very interesting. Again, beautifully shot. I don't know if he uses the same cinematographer all the time, but goodness,
that's a good question.
Goodness, his movies are so beautiful to watch.
They really are.
Yeah. So anyway, we're going to jump right into this and get into the nitty-gritty of the movie. And so this is your spoiler warning for Children of Men. We're recommending this movie. Great film. If you haven't seen it, stop the podcast, go watch it, come back. Currently, it's on Amazon if you're listening to this in 2018.
And if you're listening to it in 2038, where should they go find it?
In 2038, we're all going to be dead.
Oh, that's dark. Thanks, Nick.
Well, we're about to get dark, so...
You better watch this movie before 2038 when we're all dead.
Right. You better watch it now because the world's going to collapse here in just a couple of years, so...
I have a more hopeful view of the future, but...
Let's talk about that. So, spoiler warning, here we go. So, just a brief plot summary of what the film is about. In the year 2027, the world is on the brink of complete socio-political and economic collapse. The reason? No new babies have been born in almost 2 decades.
Dun, dun, dun.
Due to incurable infertility in women, illegal immigrants seek sanctuary in the United Kingdom, where the last functioning government imposes oppressive immigration laws on refugees. It's here that we meet Theo, a drunken, post-idealist, divorcee civil servant who has given up on the world and his own life. His apathy, though, is called into question by his returning ex-wife who has a job for him: smuggle a Fuji girl to the border. He soon finds out, though, that she is no ordinary girl, but the first pregnant woman in 18 years.
What?
Twist. Theo must battle the government, radical groups, and his own demons in order to save humanity's last hope for redemption.
Wow.
Yeah. You like that?
You just summarized that so beautifully.
Very nice. Yeah. So you still need to see it, but I just gave you what it is.
There you go. So for those of you who didn't.
Before we dive, though, right into the details of this, we're going to play a little game.
I feel like this film almost defies summary, though. Like the way you summed it. Your summary was great, but there's still so much that doesn't go in a summary that was still amazing.
That's very much focused on just Theo, the main player. But there are so many side roads and other things that it focuses on that's really good. So we're going to play a little game here before we get started.
Let's play a game.
So we're going to talk, in our discussion about this film, we're going to talk about utopias and dystopias, because this film is in a dystopia. And so I've mentioned this on previous podcasts. I've been listening to The Great Courses, How Great Science Fiction Works by Gary K. Wolfe. And he teaches courses, and specifically on the science fiction literature genre. And he does something with his students that I haven't told you this, but I've gotten you to do for me.
What?
Yeah.
Did you incept me?
I planted these ideas and then I got the goodies out. And so I've tricked you a little bit here, and it almost broke down today when I asked you to do the second part of this. And I was like, because I pitched it to you wrong, and I was like, shoot, I did that wrong. And so I had to backpedal. I was like, no, focus, do it this way. And so I think it still worked. And so here we go. So I asked Brett today, today I asked you to name 5 major life events you will experience in the next 50 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And I wanted you to include dates. So Brett, you're 32. You're going to make it to 82. Congratulations.
Thanks. Hooray for living.
You're above the national average, I believe. In America, I think it's like guys are at 72, 75, something around there. So you're beating most guys. I'm going to be honest,
when you did this and you're like 50 years into the future, and I started thinking about like life events, I'm like, my death could be in there.
Right? You never know. But I'm calling it now. You're good.
Wow, thank you.
You got another 50.
Even though you just said everybody's going to die in 2038.
Don't think about that. We'll get to that later. Okay, so I asked you to give me 5 major life events, and you gave me these. I put them in order of how you gave them. So you with dates. So you said in December of 2026. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's 2018 now, and you said December of 2026 you're going to produce a feature-length film.
Yep.
Okay.
I said that.
Yeah.
I sure did.
Yeah. Is that a goal
that's one of those things that I think whenever I get 40, I'm gonna just super get the itch and be like, oh, I haven't done this before. I'll be honest, I have always wanted to, even if it's garbage, I've always thought like making something that hits that over 45 minutes, but more like an hour to an hour and a half.
Hour and a half, yeah.
Like I've that's always been a watermark that I've never even worked on a film project that's there.
Yeah, because you've done a lot of short films, and they're good, but you haven't gone up to...
I don't know that I'd say that, but thanks for your confidence.
Oh, I appreciate it. I would love to see you do a feature-length film. I think
it'd be fun.
I'd totally watch that. Yeah. I'd help you on it.
Wow, good. Yeah. I'm going to need a lot of help because I have no money.
So your plan is to procrastinate till 40.
Till 40, yeah.
And
well,
then light a fire underneath
right
you.
Right now,
and
I actually have several friends who are like hitting 40 or have just turned 40, and all of them are at this point in their lives where they're doing things like this. Like I've got a friend Brian who is currently working on a pitch for a series, and it's like I'm 40 now. I need to do this. I've got another friend who he had done some comics work and then kind of got into just the mundane routine of life, and he's like, I need to continue this comic series. And so he's getting super into that. But so seeing 10 years from now or a little less whenever I hit 40, I'm like, that's going to be one of those things that kind of kicks me in the pants. And,
nice. So so they're doing like the creative person's Harley Davidson.
Oh, yeah.
This is their midlife. I got to do something crazy, but because they're creatives, they're not going out and buying a Ferrari or something crazy.
Or cheating on their wives. No, they're like, I want to make a movie. So yeah,
that's a good way to go.
I
Be
agree.
constructive about it. All right, so 2026, produce a feature-length film. September 5th, this is very specific. September 5th, 2036, so 10 years after that, go to space as a tourist. Gonna go to space as a tourist.
I figure whenever my 50th birthday, surely space tourism, even if it's just like they've already done with, Virgin Spaceship One, or some of those programs like
SpaceX.
Somebody is going to be taking people as tourists into low Earth orbit. And so for my 50th birthday, that'd be fun.
And this is 10 years after your smash hit. feature film
that probably didn't go anywhere, and so
that made millions of dollars.
I will have
so
had
now
to save.
You've made millions of dollars.
Thank you
on
for
your
that.
film.
That's super optimistic.
And it's grossed. It's got 10 years, so digital sales and everything like that. You've got got some money in the bank, and now you're going to go to space.
It probably isn't going to gross a lot initially. It's going to be the cult following that builds up afterwards.
People aren't going to appreciate your art.
It'd be 5-10 years later.
It's going to be completely mismarketed and horrible. It's going to bomb, but it'll gain a crazy following. And it'll be like Rocky Horror Picture Show. They'll go to it and sing along and jump around.
Exactly. And I'll spend that money to go to space once.
There you
go. For 5 minutes.
Blow it all on one trip to space. Totally worth it. Okay. So a year later from that, June 30th, 2037, you'll be celebrating your 25th wedding anniversary.
Hooray! That was a big one.
Yeah.
That was actually, I think that was the first one I submitted to you, maybe.
I think so. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice...
something to look forward to. I'm really
looking forward to, yeah. So, okay, from there we go to summer 2048, successfully launching all of our children into adulthood.
We currently only have one, and this isn't an announcement. Podcast audience, don't get any ideas. This is
just the end date of nothing past this.
That was sort of a if we have kids like we're planning, then within the next 5 to 7 years, something like that, we will have had all the children, and that gave them enough time to get to past college. Because I'm going to be understanding if one of our kids, as bad as things currently are, and one of them gets finished with college and they need to move back home, I'm gonna be understanding.
That's very, very understanding of you.
And this is recorded now, so they can hold me to that.
They have to go back and find it in 20 years. So, okay. So that's summer of 2048. Spring of 2056, so almost another 10-year jump. Retire to the beach.
Mm-hmm. I'll be about 70 then.
About 70?
That was the math, and I don't figure I'm going to be able to retire before then. So
I know that's early for now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are still people who are like my parents.
But you're going to be award-winning film director.
Who went to space once.
Yeah. Exactly. So you can retire at 70. Yeah. That's not a big deal.
Yeah. Well, and I figure modestly. I would love for my wife and I just to have a little cottage somewhere along the Atlantic. That would be nice. That's kind of our dream. We both, actually just this past summer, we visited Myrtle Beach, and we were walking along the beach, and we're like, this is our dream. This is both of our dream, just to be able to take a walk like this.
Right, isn't it? I mean, yeah, having a house on the beach, that is kind of a dream. That and in the mountains. I really like the mountains as well. Mm-hmm. I could do either of those. So that's going to be your retirement homes on the beach?
That's a retirement home whenever I'm around 70 on the beach.
Okay. So those are your five major life events for the next 50 years.
Hooray!
Now, here's where I tricked you. Because I said we were changing it up. And I lied because we're not changing up. A week ago, I asked you, name 5 major world-changing events that will happen in the next 50 years.
Yeah.
And include dates. And so I told you, 50 years, 5 events, 50 years, 5 events. And so that was your life. Here are the world-changing events. So April 2020, okay, and that's not far. That's only 2 years away from now. A small nuclear weapon will be used in a densely populated area in Israel. Terrorist groups will claim ownership, and there will be international suspicion of connection to Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, or Turkey. Mm-hmm. So in 2 years from now, you have a small nuclear weapon going off in the Middle East.
It's gotta happen. That's the sad thing, is I feel like something like that
is inevitable.
As long as there are nukes on this planet, it's gonna get in the wrong person's hands or somebody who will use it. It's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I again, given geopolitics right now, I figured that area would be especially rife for it, especially since the countries I listed already have nuclear capabilities. So
we're turning down the dire road right now. So, okay. So that's April 2020, 2 years from now. 2 years later, November 2022, major companies will take a new approach to development by moving to underdeveloped countries and offering education, jobs, and housing in exchange for lifetime service. Oh, that sounds nice. The quality of living offered by these companies will be questionable, better than the life they had, competitive with the quality of living of other developed countries. However, the people will exclusively be trained to perform a specific higher function task in service of a company.
Yep.
So you think the major companies of the world are going to move into the third world countries?
Yeah.
And make industry.
That to me feels like the next step in outsourcing.
Makes sense.
You just go enslave people, but you make sure their quality of life is good enough that nobody questions it. And it could already be happening.
Like, you could make the argument that is already happening, but this is a more blatant, this is what we're doing.
I'll be honest with you, I almost wanted to say that a company would just basically declare itself its own like nation state, but I don't know that they'll ever make exactly that kind of grab. I feel like this is the kind of move that will set the course for that, or maybe how we interpret it. Because, I mean, there are a lot of people who feel like corporations may be replacing countries as major world powers.
Well, because there's some countries that or some companies that are richer than the GDP of third world nations easily.
Yeah.
They have a lot more money and resources than an entire nation. Okay. Very interesting thought. 4 years after that, March 2026, the European Union will dissolve, leading to conflict between European nations and further upheaval as former EU states break into smaller countries or are annexed by other countries. Let history be our guide.
Yeah, and I actually may be optimistic at how long the EU holds together.
You kicked that down the road a little bit further.
Yeah, then it might actually
even happen. Yeah. Well, we're already seeing that with Brexit and other things that are happening.
Some of the stuff that's happened in Spain, too, was kind of on my mind as I was writing that.
Yeah. And, the Soviet Union, we've seen stuff break apart. Nations have changed. Borders have changed plenty over there.
Well, and even some of the trade talks that are going on right now between our country and the other NAFTA partners. I mean, we could see a very different North America in a year.
That's very true. Okay, June 2029, a tech company will release an advanced energy cell that will increase battery life in small devices and finally enable electric vehicles to reach commercial viability.
Hooray!
That's actually a nice one. So electric cars, fully electric cars with batteries that do the job. They're not just having to be recharged after a day or so.
Yeah.
They'll have viable, like you can
be
go
able to get across the country
trip.
And yeah. I think that technology is going to continue to grow. I think that may be increasing, like that process may be sped up if there are oil shortages or things like that happen. But yeah, it's going to happen.
All right. So this one. February 2036, the first major broadly accepted step toward transhumanism will be made by large numbers of people in developed countries as they willingly allow nanobots into their bodies to monitor health conditions. It will first be adopted by the elderly with specific medical conditions, then infants, and quickly the adult population thereafter.
Yep. We're all going to get nanites in our blood, and then we're going to be the Borg. Yeah.
So that's February 2036. How far off is that? Not 20 years from now.
Not even. Yeah.
Okay.
That's, yeah. Well, and can you picture the commercials for that? Like, I just can't wait to see the commercials for nanites.
Because they'll have to market it a fun way.
Well, especially if it's old people, because it'll be like, they'll probably do like a nostalgic callback to the, like, help, I've fallen and I can't get up. Except it'll be like, help, I'm having my liver's failing, and and it'll be like the nanites will signal the phone and be like, doo. We're calling, Siri will call the.
Well, it won't even be that. It'll be the nanites know.
Yeah.
They'll sense you're having a heart attack and they will dial for help.
Yeah. Or whatever.
It'll blink
they,
on your wrist saying,
yeah,
you're having a heart attack right now.
We're taking care of that.
Medical professionals are on the way. Yeah. So that's nice and creepy.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of
I think it's funny that you said that
Yeah.
the elderly will take it on first, because I do understand that idea of they would need, that medical assistance like Life Alert or something like that. But we're going to be the old people, or getting up older, and those a little ahead of us.
The people just a little ahead of us, and those are people who, like, every new advance that's come along has made their lives better. So why, when they're getting old, wouldn't they be like, oh, this is the next technological advance? Why shouldn't I sign up for that? That's
true.
Great.
That's true. I guess I'm more of a curmudgeon.
People who are like
people.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm not signing up for this junk.
Well, and as I said, we will be the last people to accept it.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
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 So yeah, people a little younger than us, maybe. There may be a generation that comes along that, they're more resistant to technology, but yeah, I think definitely, like, even my parents' generation, I think once that point comes along, they would be willing to.
They'd be like, yeah, we don't understand any of this technology anyway. We're just going to do this.
Yeah. Well, and think of all the people who have had to have the latest, like, iPhones and all of those kinds of things. And, yeah.
Makes sense. All right, so you actually threw in a sixth one, but I like it, and so I'm going to put it in here.
I think that was just an accident. I'm bad at counting.
That's all right. April 2061, a manned mission to Mars will establish the first extraterrestrial colony.
Hooray for Mars.
Yeah.
And
so
that's based more or less on NASA's predictions.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Of where they think they're going to be.
Yeah.
So
I actually, they think they're ahead of that, and I was like, let's be real.
You're not as optimistic.
I bumped it maybe like 10 years, something like that. So
that's a nice buffer room right there for them to get it done. Okay, so the reason I had you do this.
Okay, here it comes.
Gary K. Wolfe in his course that he teaches, or at least he had taught before, he said that he would, at the beginning of the semester, he would ask all of his students to write down the top world events that they think are going to happen in the next 50 or so years. And they would do that, and they would turn it in. And then a few weeks down the road, he would ask him this second question of, tell me some things in your life that are going to happen.
Yeah.
And he says, without fail, that the personal life events are almost always optimistic, whereas the world-changing events are pessimistic. He's without fail, and it's funny because he gives some examples of a guy who said that he's retiring. He said a few weeks down the road, he said he'd be retiring to Florida at this point in his life, but he had that after. He said
global warming.
He said the continent
Florida.
had fallen off, or that part of the country had fallen off the continent. And so the idea being that when we think of our personal hopes and dreams for the future, it's a lot easier to be optimistic and utopian in our thinking. When it's us personally and what we're going to experience, but when it's the world, and you had a couple positive things in here with the tech and the mission of Mars, but I would argue, I mean, these other three are bad, and I would argue that the nanites are bad.
You don't want to be assimilated? Come on.
Nope, no thank you. I would argue that these would obviously put into a dystopian type future.
Oh, totally.
And so,
or could fit. I mean, because even the nanites, like that is the basis of so many Black Mirror episodes, and those are all abysmal. So,
well, anytime you start integrating tech like that, it's where could it go wrong, and when Skynet coming around the corner. So anyway, that's why I wanted to do that exercise to let you see personally what you would think for the future. What do you think about those answers and how they align?
Yeah, well, it was interesting to me that the personal answers, I was looking, like, they skip like 10 years every time. The world changing things were mostly
were
the next,
a lot closer.
Decade.
Yeah. And they were negative, and so you're thinking about the world in almost like, do you have a pessimistic view of your near future or of the world's near future?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
That's very interesting. Well, we're going to jump into Children of Men with that mindset of how we think about the future in terms of positive utopian ideas or negative dystopian ideas. But let's talk about really quick, what's something that you really liked about this work?
Michael Caine.
Michael Caine.
The character of Jasper is amazing in this. Like,
Isn't he?
I love everything about that character.
It's a very different character for Michael Caine.
Yeah.
He doesn't...
And yet so similar. Because there's still that whole, like, giving philosophy and those kinds of things.
Right.
That he
He's
does a
still
lot,
in a mentor role for Theo.
But it's so irreverent. And I love... Because I've heard even comedians do jokes about, what about our generation when we're in care centers and we're listening to, like, rap and things like that? Picturing us. And so he's kind of that character. Because, like, he's listening to stuff that you're like, old people don't listen to this kind of...
Right.
That's us as old people.
He has this, like, weird... synthetic tribal monkey crazy out there music, and he's growing reefer in his house.
Yep. That's us. That's our generation, super old.
Yeah. He's such a pull my finger. What a crazy
pull my finger. Oh my goodness.
What a crazy kook. Yeah. But always good, Michael Caine. Love that guy. Anything else you really like?
The cinematography of this film blows my mind.
Right.
So as somebody who makes films on a super small, largely corporate and, kind of boring way, to see just the work, like long takes that were used in this are so beautifully executed, because there's an element, well, in something like that even, there's the element of choreography that you have to pull off, but then that you're able to compose shots as you're moving around and on the go. That blows my mind. And then just the compositions that this film has. The one that really stands out to me when Theo is talking with the midwife that they're traveling with. I forget that character's name.
Oh, I forget too. Yeah, she's like the religious lady.
Yeah, and they're in what is it? An old like medical ward. Mm-hmm. And the windows are all broken out, but you can see through the cracks in the window that Key is in the background.
Oh, that she's like framed in that window perfectly?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, that's Citizen Kane level cinematography right there. It's just beautiful.
That wasn't a medical ward. That was a preschool.
That's right.
Yeah. And that was the playground behind it.
Because there was a swing set.
Swing
set, yep.
But and it's crazy, too, because in that scene, it's whoever has the camera... walks in to it, and they have their conversation, and the cameraman goes and stands at a point and turns, and then she's perfectly framed in that window. And so they had to mark all of that out perfectly and make sure that their actors, that she came around in the right way. And crazy. And that's not even the big one. The big one for me is the car. How they had that whole had that all rigged up with the camera that was floating inside the cabin, and they had because I looked at behind the scenes stuff for it, and they had a big rig on top where that camera just pivoted around, and they just did a oner of the whole thing, which is insane.
It is insane, and then it goes into even them getting attacked by the people on the countryside. Like
he wakes up. They're talking, they're having fun. They do the little ping pong game, and then right into action, and then run away, and then the cops, and all of that one take. Crazy. Yeah. So good. One of the things I really, especially in researching it and then on the subsequent viewing of it, is the religious and art symbology within the movie. Man, it's so dense, and there's so much to get out of it. Just little, and we'll go through this when we're talking about specifics of the themes in the movie. But a few things that I wanted to share right off the bat. The name of the movie is Children of Men, and the book as well. And that name comes from, because there's a ton of religious, specifically Christian symbology in the film, but that name of the movie comes from Psalm 90, where Moses and Israel are in the wilderness because of their unbelief, and so they're cast out. They're not able to go to the promised land, and so they're out in the wilderness, and he is lamenting of where they are. And it talks about how God will turn men back to dust. All the children of men will go back to dust, which is the idea of this this movie of humanity is falling.
Yeah.
But it's this movie isn't like it's very dense in its symbology, and it doesn't pull its punches. Like, it's very obvious in a lot of ways of what it's trying to do. I mean, it came out. Do you know the release date? It was Christmas Day.
Wait, what?
It came out Christmas
They dropped
Day.
it on Christmas. That's hilarious.
Well, in America, it came out earlier in the UK and overseas, but in America, it came out on Christmas Day 2006.
Well, especially with all the Christ imagery that's throughout the film.
Right. Well, the Theo, Key, and Dylan,
Yep.
the baby girl Dylan, is they're straight up the Holy Family.
Yeah.
Like, it's very obvious that it's Mary, Joseph, and the babe, having to leave their home and go to a new land. When they get to the internment camp, there's an innkeeper that they need to find, and she gets them set up in this nasty little dark shack that looks pretty much like a cave. It might as well be with only one light. There's animals around everywhere when they get there. At the end, when they're in the boat and they go out, there's a beacon light, and for the wise men of the human project to come and find them, the symbology is very heavy and thick there. That they he knew exactly what he was referencing and what he was doing, and in that it's very beautiful because it's an allegory in a way, but it's not just he's not just relating those characters for any reason. He's relating them because it fits within the theme. That story fits within this story's theme and the entire idea of redemption and the hope in one individual.
Yeah, well, the best symbolism always enriches the work whenever you make an allusion to something. If it's a story or another work of fiction or whatever it is you're referencing, it's those things are only good when they do fit so well thematically. Yeah,
and he references a lot in this film. The other thing I was thinking of was the art, like the artwork of the film. There is when Theo goes to see his cousin and he walks in and there's David standing right there, and his cousin walks over and he says, we couldn't save La Pietà, which is Mary and dead Jesus in her hands. He's like, we couldn't save her. It was smashed up before we got there, because he has all of his artwork in the Ark of the Arts there, that he's saved from people looting and tearing it down. And so he references that. Then they go in and they're having their meal, and behind them is Guernica from Pablo Picasso. That's his Guernica. And over in the left side is a mother with her child dead in her hands because of the bombing that happened in Spain under the communists there. And so he references that imagery of La Pietà, and then Guernica's right there with the woman and her dead son. And then at the end of the film, when she has the baby and they're in the internment camp, and they stay in that apartment up top for a little while, and then they come down to get in the boat and leave. And as soon as they come out onto the street, there's a woman sitting screaming, and she has her dead son in her hands right there. And the camera, in the many times that he does it, it leaves Theo for a second and goes over and looks, and it focuses on her, like, straight up.
Oh, how cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's set up early in that time of that imagery, and then it brought it into something very real and tangible right there, a woman with her dead son in her hands.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, just beautiful imagery and attention to detail again, of thinking those things through. And it's like he was placing those there beforehand, knowing that he would go and have that moment there as well. Also, the graffiti in the streets, there's graffiti everywhere because of it's dystopian, and it's, that's you could just say that, it works for the setting and the time that it's in. But I really like the idea because I feel like he's talking about art. Specifically, one of the messages of in this future without hope, that people wouldn't be creating art in the same way because they don't have hope for the future.
Yeah.
And so what would that look like? All of their sacred art has been stolen and taken away from them at the Ark, and it's put in the Ark. And so everywhere has graffiti. And so I wonder if that was an idea of this is people expressing, their anger, their frustration. You see the Human Project sprayed on one wall, and when you see that shot, there's somebody painting over.
Yeah.
And so it's the government again taking away their art and them expressing.
I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but yeah, totally.
Yeah, that when you see that scene, there's somebody painting over the graffiti that's on the wall.
Well, and even the way he has to pass through heavy security to get into the Ark of the Arts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so funny because it's so nuts outside, and then he passes through those gates, and then as soon as he's on the other side, there's people like in fancy parties. Like there's a fancy party happening. There's guys on horseback, and then everyone's dressed really nice. Yeah, and it seems like nothing's happened. At all. Oh, another thing too is the big pig hanging that's blown up above the building, which is a reference to it's a reference to Animal Farm, but it's also to I think it's Led Zeppelin album.
Wait, is it a Pink Floyd album?
No, Pink Floyd. That's right. Yeah, Pink Floyd album where the pig is over that exact same building, which was that was a reference to Animal Farm, which is another dystopian, government takeover piece. And so it's like I love the referencing back of what we already know in our world and it being in play in this world. I really like that. Yeah, just beautiful. The attention to detail and the artistry of this piece is incredible.
You could almost watch this movie without like the sound on, and it would still stand out just because of how well crafted it is.
Man, that would be an experiment right there to see if you did make it a silent film, could you understand everything that was happening? That would be an interesting experiment. Of course, you already know it if you've watched it. That would be something for someone who's like a virgin going into it would need to make that experiment work or not. But yeah. So is this work sci-fi? And is it good or bad sci-fi?
It's in a gray area, but I would say especially since it's projecting into the future. We talked about in some ways science fiction is just came out of that kind of birth of thinking about the future. Like the genre is born when people start not just recording the past and telling stories of the past, but they're like, oh wait, what if we did the same thing but forward and talked about that? And so I think in that way, in that it's a story set in the future, it has that the big medical mystery that's present in this work about human infertility. There definitely could be something, and you could take that idea and make it hard sci-fi even, and just really explore kind of that idea. I think the
idea
movie,
of finding the cure and what's the cause and all that.
The movie
very technical.
Kind of just finesses, like it just uses that as the premise and doesn't really explore it a lot, like why has this happened or what, But I would definitely say it's a work of sci-fi, and that theme of human infertility has been explored by a lot of other works. There's several episodes of Star Trek that you've got a race that either can't have their own children anymore, or that they have spent generations just cloning themselves and gave up, the standard practice of having children. You also have there's a work that, whenever I was thinking about this, that was really similar. Brian Vaughan's "Y: The Last Man," which is a comic book published by Vertigo. And it documents this guy who happened to survive a mass extinction of men among, I think in the story, it's like every mammal species.
Right. Yeah, he
loses
is
all
the
of the-
only
yeah.
one. And so the question, of course, is why?
Yeah.
I think, is his name why as well?
Yorick, I think is
Your-
yeah.
yeah,
So
why?
Why?
But that is the question posed: is
Yeah.
why is he the only one
Yeah.
left? And I was thinking too. That's a big thing in science fiction as well. The cure person, like that's been done several times. I think of like I Am Legend, that immediately comes to mind. Of there's an apocalypse that happens, and there's one person, something in their blood, or something like that they have the cure. They're the key.
Well, and if you think about just scientific development in the last few centuries, medical science has been one of the biggest ones, and it's tremendously impacted our lives. Like all of us are living longer and living healthier because of advances made in medical science. So sure, to use something that relates to medical science as the basis for your stories, it's totally science fiction.
Yeah. Well, and at first I thought, is that fantastical? The idea of no woman can have babies in almost 20 years. They haven't figured this out. That seems a bit, it seems like an easy plot, a device to use. But I then was thinking about Henrietta Lacks. Have you ever, know who she is?
No.
She's the Hela, immortal cell. She is the person, because going back to this idea of the person who's the cure, and that's used in science fiction a lot. Well, she's a real person. She's passed now, but her cells are. They found out she had a cancerous cell that was taken out and had biopsies done. Her story is incredible to look at and go through. But her cells are immortal. They constantly duplicate. They never stop. And so a ton of medical research has been done with using her cells, and a ton of breakthroughs have happened because of her cells. And so it sounds a bit like out there and crazy, but this has actually happened in our world, that there's been one person who is almost like the key to the research and development and to having cures and ways to figure out how to treat diseases and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah. So it seems, and I'll say this too, Alfonso Cuarón, he doesn't think that this is sci-fi.
Really?
When asked about, because it's very much, if you type in sci-fi movies in Google, this will come up. It's
totally, yeah.
We think of it as that, but when he's asked about it, he pushes against it. And I watched an interview with him where he says, "This is a chase movie." He's like, "This is just a chase movie." And then recently he did a interview with Vulture in 2016, so 10 years had passed, and they were talking to him about how predictive this work was because of the refugee crisis that's happening right now in the world. Nationalism, people closing off their borders, people and the state of the world. They were like, this is it was your movie's in 2027, but it's happening now in 2016. And his answer is awesome. Can I read it to you? So Cuarón, however, is not feeling like taking an overdue victory lap. Curled over a table in an upscale Mexico City restaurant, the 55-year-old director gets a little irritated when I laud the film's imaginative pre-science. This thing was not imagination, he says, jabbing his finger into the tablecloth. By Cuarón's estimation, anyone surprised at the accuracy of his movie's predictions was either uninformed or willfully ignorant about the way the world already was in 2006. People were talking about those things, just not in the mainstream, he says. He was reading about refugees, know-nothing reactionaries, and eerie disruptions in biological processes during the early 2000s. If Children of Men can be said to have a message, Cuarón encapsulates it. What's really relevant now, he tells me, is to stop being complacent. And so his idea, he did not set out to make this movie to be a sci-fi dystopian. He had the idea of jumping in on this project after 9/11. I read about, because 9/11 happened, and he dove into this project and he wanted to do it, but then Warner Brothers came up asking him to do Harry Potter. So he did Harry Potter. I think that came out in maybe 2003 or something like that. And then he immediately jumped back onto this. He was actually still working on this during Potter, getting it together and talking about it with his producers and stuff.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "This is I want to do this." And he was basing it solely. His argument is he was basing it solely on the real world, not on in a future fantasy or sci-fi, anything like that.
Yeah, but
so I thought that was really interesting.
That's the basis of great sci-fi, though.
Right. That it's based on what we know and
what you can observe and projecting that into the future. Like, yeah,
absolutely.
I call shenanigans.
Well, that's getting a little into the weeds on definitions probably right there, but he is very much about this is real, this is happening.
Yeah.
And it's very much happening in the world. And so let's get into utopias versus dystopias really quick. So I'm just going to run through a brief history so that if you're unfamiliar with utopias or dystopias, this will give you a little bit of ideas and parameters for how we're going to talk about our topic today. So utopia, the idea of utopia was coined by Sir Thomas More in 1516. That was when the actual word first appeared, although there was literature before him. So this is really early. This is very long before the science fiction genre came into its own right. So this is 1516.
So, this is a sci-fi part. We've got to stop right there. This doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about.
But he's the one that actually... And see, that's the thing, too, is that utopias and dystopias don't necessarily always fit into the sci-fi genre. They can be outside of it, but they're... especially dystopias are highly tied to sci-fi today, especially any modern one that's being made. But he coined the term utopia in 1516, which is basically a good world is basically the idea of that. Is something, a pleasant future, a good world. Utopias were, and you could even go back to Plato's Republic, that he was talking about a future, a beautiful society. But utopias got very popular in the 19th century. They exploded. Everyone wanted to write one, and so there's all kinds of different works. A lot of them focus on islands set off somewhere else, which I find funny, that they set islands outside of all known culture and races and the problems of normal society.
So basically, you can have a utopia if you just don't have any people.
Exactly.
Oh.
Exactly. You can make a utopia work if it's not attached to anything we have or know now. It's a people who have had no contact with the normal world. But a lot of people did those, and they got really big in the 19th century, most likely because of modernity, evolution, and an idealist idea that was in that century. There was the boom of industrialization and evolution, science growing, people having just a general positive idea of the future.
Even modernism had an impact on like Christian eschatology, and there were a lot of people who had adopted more of like a post-millennial view that, it's just getting better all the time, and we're just going to keep getting better until eventually Jesus comes, and we're just going to get better after that. Like that's modernism. Like, let's just march towards a better future. Yeah.
Yeah, it permeated the entire world of, we're now in this new age. All of the old ages have, and superstitions and the dark times and all of that's behind us. Everything from now is a move upward, up the hill to greater things, and it's only going to get better and better. And to an extent, that it was and is true, that things have progressed. Society and cultures and science and everything has progressed and gotten better in the world in some ways, not so much in other ways. But that was the idea of the times in the 1800s, that idealism was on the rise, humanism was on the rise, that we can take control of this world and make it better. But then
what happened in the 1900s?
Well, then the turn of the century happened. And dystopias got popular in the 20th century. Well, surprise, surprise, why? Because there's specifically a shift around 1912 to 1914. I wonder why.
There wasn't like worldwide geopolitical breakdowns happening, were there, Nick?
Right. Yeah. World War I happened.
Oh.
And so you could make it easy and say it was just that, but there was also the Russian Revolution that happened in tandem with that. Communism, Soviet Union, all of those things coming into effect, which had repercussions, of course.
Yeah, but then, Nick, after that, we had the Roaring '20s and things were awesome.
It was beautiful. Yeah.
Everything was great.
Everything got back to normal.
And better. Yeah. We continued onward and
no problems after that.
In our Art Deco.
Right.
It was great.
Yeah, there wasn't another looming threat right around the corner.
What? You shut your mouth.
Yeah. So that makes complete sense that and it wasn't just the wars. There was because industrialization had gotten everyone to a point in the 19th century. Now it had turned into big business and people feeling like cogs in a machine, and then playing into people's literature on the topic of, well, what is our world going to be in the future? So dystopias, from then on, utopia hasn't had a really good bounce back since then. That from then on, dystopias have been really the name of the game in literature, at least. They've been.
Thanks, 20th century, for ruining literature.
Yeah. It'd be interesting. I wonder if utopia will ever have a bounce back. Like if it will become another, because right now we've recently had a big resurgence of dystopian literature and film and TV shows and things like that. It is very popular right now.
I think there's a difficulty present in writing a utopia that you don't have in writing a dystopia, because our stories are so often built around conflict. And so if you look at like a lot of those older utopian writings, a lot of them are like essays that are just kind of describing or speculating about this thing.
There's not a lot of plot. There's not a lot of characters.
Exactly.
It's just somebody waxing about the future.
Yeah.
And so to break down, just for a simple definition, a utopia, if you think about utopia and dystopia, utopia asks the question of, can our lives be better? Whereas a dystopia asks, can our reality be worse? And that's the question being posed. And utopia is something that is achievable. That is something that we are progressing in trying to achieve, whereas a dystopia is something we're trying to avoid. One is pleasant future, but yet often has underlying flaws. Whereas a dystopia is usually negative, dire future, but sometimes has glimmers of hope in it. Oftentimes has glimmers of hope within it. What you were talking about with utopias is funny, because when you do go back and look at those old literatures, I mean, specifically Utopia by Sir Thomas More, he had slaves in his Utopia. Straight up.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's not a utopia for those people.
It's funny because when you look back at those 19th century ones, they read really weird to modern people. That's just like, that's not a correct society that you're putting forth there. And the problem inherent in a utopia is it's going to be tailored to its writer and to their perspective on the world of, if I'm putting forward this is the highest echelon of human society, this is the peak, it's obviously going to come out of most likely my hubris and my thought of what I think the world should be. And a lot of times, and this is probably why it in literature and in film has probably collapsed, is that it's really hard to do that and for everyone to agree
that's true.
on it, that is the bright, beautiful future.
Well, and I would say the one possible utopia that you could talk about would be Star Trek in the world of science fiction, and even that, like they either have to break it somehow, or they're interacting with people outside of the utopia, and how do you interact that way? But there's not a lot of episodes of just everybody having an awesome time.
Right. The utopia is back on Earth, but we're out in space.
Yeah.
Like, we figured out all our problems back on Earth. It's a great place, but we're explorers and we're going out into these unknown regions where it's not that. So don't worry, there's going to be conflict.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that.
Well, and then some of the conflict arises, as you said, there oftentimes in utopias are fundamental flaws, and so you see, like Deep Space Nine that does poke at some of the flaws that would be inherent in a system like that.
Mm-hmm. I think, and this is an odd opinion, I mentioned this to you the other day, that I think dystopian literature is actually positive, whereas utopian literature is negative, which is the reverse of what inside the story is the setting a lot of times. And the reason being is that I think a writer, utopias have like a suppressing, depressing effect, I think, whereas dystopias have the kernel of truth in them, of this is what could happen. And so they're coming from a writer and from a place of knowing that would be the bad road to go down on. And so they are cautionary tales. And so to me, the writer is thinking more clearly about what society should be and what it shouldn't be, whereas maybe the writer of utopia is a bit too proud, maybe, and they're thinking of this is what it will be, and let's all get behind this. I mean, people have tried utopias. They literally have in society, and surprise, surprise, most of them don't last.
That's true.
Very long. Like the communal living, the cults. There's when people get together and they're like, we're going to form a new society and we won't have any property. We're all going to share. And it always...
Well, even the grand communist and socialist experiments that have happened on national scales.
Right. Have in many ways crumbled, or those that are still existent have...
There are all kinds of human rights violations.
Exactly. Yeah. And the idea of a lot of times that breeds in a utopian society, there's usually power struggles, because the idea a lot of times that I think isn't considered is people themselves, is that, yes, we could get to a better place as a society with technology, with our health, things could get better, but people are still going to be people. And people have flaws, and people are selfish. And so if you have people running the society, how can it be perfect?
Yeah. They're going to want everything to be equal, except more equal for them.
Exactly. Which, when you even get down to like the small, tiny cults, what happens is the cult leader has a ridiculous amount of power, usually is hoarding money. And all the resources for themselves, and is usually doing some kinky, weird things as well that, when they're found out, is super unsettling.
Oh, absolutely.
And so people have tried, and there's these ideas, but a lot of times they break down. And so I feel that dystopias are actually better for people to be reading or to be watching, because they're at least cautionary tales of, if you take this that we're doing now and you take it to its furthest extent, it could be this, and so let's think about this. And that's a tool for positive change. In my opinion, that's how I view it. Yeah. So we're specifically going to be talking about, one thing I mentioned was that dystopias have a kernel, most often have a kernel of hope inside them, even though it's a terrible future in dire situation. There's always a glimmer of hope that then the plot hinges on and moves forward. So we're going to be talking about the role of hope in Children of Men. Now, do you think Children of Men accurately depicts what the world like a world without hope would be?
That's hard to say.
Yeah.
Because you posed that question, and I was really thinking about it. One of the things I started thinking about is the difference between what a fascist dystopia and an anarchist dystopia would be. Because you kind of, you've got like the world of like The Walking Dead, where everything just sort of falls to chaos. And that's very different than what you see in Children of Men, where there's still a lot. I mean, there's still people working civil service jobs.
Right. Because it's not an immediate world-ending doom. It's a world-ending doom that's coming in 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And so how do you sit with that?
Yeah.
When the entire race will be wiped out due to just disease and old age. Mm-hmm. But it's not a alien attack. It's not a zombie attack. It's not something we can all band together on right now and try to fix. Mm-hmm. Except for the scientists who are trying to figure out infertility, but they're not having any luck with that.
Yeah, I get the feeling that if a real dystopia were to happen, people would actually probably continue doing things that they'd normally do as long as they could. Yeah. And so even, like the kind of anarchist law that you have in something like The Walking Dead, zombie apocalypse scenarios, that kind of thing, where, everybody resorts to savagery and things. I don't know that people would necessarily do that. Yeah. Especially initially. And now, I mean, this story takes place, 20 years basically after the event happens. And so it's interesting to wonder, would people continue just going about their lives from that point on? And I feel like in some ways, it as long as they were able to, as long as people are able to, I was actually just listening to, there's a podcast and radio show produced by NPR called Hidden Brain, which is awesome. If you ever get a chance to listen to it, you should. And they were actually talking about self-denial, and that self-denial can even be an important thing, that sometimes we lie to ourselves about how bad something is, because if we didn't, we couldn't cope with that. And so I do think you see a lot of, again, people who are still punching a clock, even though the world is on its way to ending. There's a certain amount of self-denial that comes into play with that. Right. Well, and you could even say that with anybody today, is that you're literally dying every day. Mm-hmm. You're not getting any younger, and you also don't know when your time is up, and yet every day you punch the clock and you do your normal routine, not knowing when the end is happening, but you accept it. You accept that as your reality. I mean, you could think about that and be like, no, I don't know, so I should do this could be my last day on Earth and live every day like your last kind of mentality, which, some people do for, I would think, a while. I don't think you could always do it. And we think those people are crazy. We all we know those people who decided to become freegans and... Exactly. Yeah. But at the same time, there's the most of society that is... This is how we know that that's coming, that everyone does, but you just go about normal life. Mm-hmm. And I like that the world, when we get into Children of Men, is crumbling. Like, most cities have fallen apart, or most nations have, and London and the UK is one of the only ones still working. But it's funny because it looks like what The Walking Dead or World War Z looks like after a matter of months, or like it's completely, everything's overgrown and everything's crumbled and it's horrible. But this, to me, seems more accurate because it is almost 20 years later, and so it would take time for people to. It would take gradual time for people to lose hope and for things to change. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing that the world state has probably crumbled more in the more recent years of that despair setting in. Yeah. And now that's why things are just falling apart and everything's well, and I would say in these types of stories, there is one thing that is less hopeful and less certain than going about your usual business in that kind of situation, which is just ending it. And like there, in this, there is a suicide option that anybody can take when they want.
That government hands out.
Yeah,
to
that the
people.
government has handed out. Yeah, and those
quietus.
Yeah, those things.
That's the name of it.
A lot of times are present in dystopias. You have the option to get out, but I mean, Shakespeare described death as the undiscovered country. There's a lot of uncertainty, and I feel like people who don't have hope here, well, is here worse than
what's next?
Yeah. And the uncertainty of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I also thought about that abandoned preschool, that idea that we talked about earlier. In that scene, the midwife talks about how when the laughter of children started disappearing because people start growing up and they're not kids anymore and no more babies being born, when the laughter of children left the world, no one knew what effect that would have. And they're standing in a abandoned preschool, which is a amazing setting to do because, once again, going back to any zombie apocalypse movie, you see the abandoned shopping mart that's been looted, or the government base that has fallen and there's tanks sitting around, or major metropolitan cities. I've never seen a dystopian
Dystopian daycare.
Dystopian daycare, and it tying so much to the reason of this reality that this place is abandoned and looted because no one needed it anymore, because it didn't have a purpose anymore.
I think that would be something that would be interesting, and I feel like good works in this do think about how would requirements change, like in the new world. So in this case, you have daycares that fall to disrepair and ruin and fall off, and I feel like that would be the thing that would make me the most nervous is, do I still function? Like, do I still have a purpose in the way that like a daycare worker doesn't have a job anymore in the world of Children of Men?
Well, I mean, talking about your purpose as a father, like the idea of there's an idea in our world that I don't know how much we think about, but I believe is how much of our hope for the future is instilled in what's coming after us, in our children. Like, you're a father, I'm a father. How much of our hope for the future is our hope for our children?
Yeah.
And
once I had a kid, it shifted a lot that direction, because I was even in the thought experiment that you had me do with, pick the things over the next, 50 years in your life. And if you had asked me that question 10 years ago, it would have been very different and a lot more, in some ways, like imaginative, like, oh, I'm going to invent a jetpack or, something like all kinds of crazy. And I'm like, no, I'm probably going to raise our kids and I'm going to.
Right.
Yeah. And so, there's a lot you invest in that, but there's that's what you're hoping for. That's what you want to pass on. And
even not even so much personally, but also as a society and culture of, laws are made and, things are invested in based on projecting down the line, years down the line. And the idea of down the line is someone being there in order to, reap the rewards of this diligence. And so if you take the idea away of, at some point, there's no one in the future to reap the benefit of any of this. And so all is futile. If what is there anything that matters? Somebody, I was listening to a analysis of this, and I didn't see this myself, but somebody pointed out that there's a Gap ad in this. I think it's Gap. It's some sort of retail company that has shifted their focus to dogs.
Oh, well, even the original story. I was reading a synopsis. I didn't have time to go through it.
Was that in this story?
But the original story, people start treating their pets like their children.
Their kids, because they naturally need something to take care of. Yeah. And so and then companies who were marketing toward baby stuff because, they have to make money and they're a company. And so they do this shift in order to push for that. And so that's how they react to a society and a culture and a future like this. It's crazy to think about how many things would have, how many ramifications would there be, and how many things down the line would be affected by this. There's just no possible way to conceive of all the ways that this despair would set in and how it would affect everything. So what draws us into a dystopian story? Why is something so grim have an appeal to us?
I love the thought experiment that is present. What would I do?
Right.
Is the core question that anytime I interact with a dystopian work, if it's Children of Men, what would I do if I'm living in this England in a post-baby world? If it's the Hunger Games, what do I do if I'm in one of these districts? If it's, you name your dystopia, The Walking Dead, am I going to be the Rick, or am I going to be the guy who dies in like the first episode? What? And I think,
would I make these same choices? Would I go down these same roads? What person am I really? What in my integrity inside? Am I, if this happened, how would I change, or would I change? Would I be the same, or would
that whole thing
I be
is
tested?
Probably part of the reason that dystopias are so beneficial for change, because they do make us, even though they're telling a story that is, it's a narrative. We look at it and there are characters that are going through their lives. It makes us think about our lives in a really tangible way.
Right. It's an easy way to, because a lot of fiction has the everyman, somebody you can relate to, or the introduction character. But if you're brought into a world where this has happened, you can easily be like, yeah, you can relate to a character even though it's in an unrelatable setting, because I could see me doing that same thing. I would probably react that same way. I also like how it's a lot of times dystopians are really just caricatures of today already. I mean, that's one thing that Cuarón was talking about, that he was thinking about the real day, but they're exaggerate. A lot of times they're exaggerations or things blown up to show their futility of maybe things that we just accept today as normal. But when you take them to their extreme, it's like, is this really the way we go about it? It's really the same system, or the same way people act is just taken to the most extreme end, and then analyzing that and being like, well, then should we be doing that?
Yeah, well, the young adult dystopias basically just take lunchroom dynamics and play those out in a dystopian setting.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, goodness. Will I choose this this boy or this boy?
Yeah, which boy do I pick? Which clique am I a part of?
Right.
And is my clique the good clique, or are we the bad guys?
But and then Hunger Games is the big example. It's the big YA property of the 21st century for dystopian.
Oh, but you've
literature.
also got like that Divergent series, and was Maze Runner had an element of
that's a big one,
dystopia to it. So,
and in all of these, there's a oppressive government and them analyzing what that means and how they got there, and there's a lot of commentary on today and what there is.
I think another reason that dystopias are appealing to us, I talked about that idea of us lying to ourselves, that we sometimes engage in self-deception. I think all of us have to do that to a certain extent on a daily basis, because we know so much more than people did centuries ago about what's going on in the world, and we're post-nuclear. I think even with some of the ways that the world has changed since the fall of the Soviet Union, and the way that we don't have the feeling that like, oh, we need to do nuclear bomb drills, I think we have to lie to ourselves to say, oh, we don't live in a world that's really dangerous, and that there could be upheaval that happens very quickly and could completely change all of the dynamics. I think to go about our normal lives, we have to lie to ourselves about that a little bit. So
Yeah.
I think it's the dystopian literature and fiction films lets us explore in a safe way some of the fears that we actually really have about the real world that we live in.
The ones that are tucked away, hidden
and we're
away,
also we're so aware of the past too. Like we know so many situations that have happened that have largely been dystopian. If you are a Jew in Germany in the 40s, you're living in a dystopia.
Right.
And we are aware of this. Like our education system has made us aware of the history of situations that have been awful for people.
Right.
And
right.
it's very easy. I think the hopelessness of the world of a dystopia is something that we're well trained in, and we have to almost turn our brains off on a daily basis just to cope.
Right. Or somebody living in a Soviet Union country who this power comes along saying, this is a utopia, this is going to be the good, and then it turns out, no, it's a dystopia, it's horrible, it's and then it crumbles and another one comes along just over and over. Almost in Europe, it's been a cycle in many countries.
Yeah. The Great Depression in the United States, too.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're alive during that period of time, you were living in largely a dystopia.
Yeah. And you don't know what the future is. It going to get better or is it going to get worse from here? Yeah. Well, then there's so much fiction. There's also a big subgenre of fiction that focuses on if Hitler did win and his Third Reich, did last and his ideas came to fruition and permeated the whole world, like Man in the High Castle and different works like that take that idea of, this could have happened. It was true history. And then let's take that and what happened if we lost and what would the world be? This isn't a crazy what if that we have to think of. It was there. This is just a natural, if things went the other way, this is what we would most likely be experiencing. Yeah. I think another big thing that appeals to us is a lot of dystopian stories are underdog stories, that it's the worst time imaginable. And so there you also find the best of humanity coming out in those, that there's somebody or some buddies who rise to the occasion and decide that they're going to risk it and try to make the positive change. And then you see the underdog story unfold of these people going up against a utilitarian government or the oppressive power or whatever. And that's what happens in this film as well. You have Theo who makes that choice to risk it all for Key and for the future. Yeah. And it's an underdog story. There's so many forces against them. That's an edge of your seat chase movie, like what Alfonso says it is. That it's intense all the way to the end. Once that kicks in, that he's going to take her and get her out. From there on, it's craziness the whole time. Yeah. Is it important for hope to exist in a largely hopeless narrative?
What do you think?
I think yes. I think the glimmer for two reasons. Like a utopia where everything's great and it's just fine, then if there's nothing underlying that's bad, then where's the narrative in that? And that's what we find a lot in utopias, is that there's not a narrative. There's no players. It's just, this is what a utopia would be, and it'd be great. And there's not a real story in those pieces of literature. Not a lot of times. Not usually good characters or good arcs. And so I think for this, there has to be a glimmer of hope for there to be some tension, for there to be a plot, basically. Yeah. But also I think that's necessary for the story, for there to be any type of story. Yeah. But I also think that true despair can't come without a little bit of hope. That right at the beginning of this film, the very first shot is Theo walking into the coffee shop. And everybody's staring at the screen because baby Diego has died, who even though they haven't figured out infertility, no one's having babies, there's just this one youngest kid that everyone has, for some reason, put their hopes in.
Which people totally would.
People totally would. They would look at him.
Believable.
They would look at him as some sort of Christ figure, or hope for the next, because he is the youngest. He has the longest potentially to live, even though he's killed. He's taken at 18.
As he's described later, he was a total jerk. Like,
right.
Because I think that what little bit we get about his death, and it's expounded on in what I read about the book, he basically died in a bar fight.
Yeah, that's what in the report is, that there was a fan who wanted a picture, in the movie at least, there was a fan who wanted a picture, and he said no, and then
he's basically
it killed
Justin
him.
Bieber. Like,
basically.
Yeah.
But I like the it's crazy the impact, because there's all these people who don't know this guy. Theo goes into work, there's all these people grieving, watching the screens. Later, he's walking along, and there's people laying flowers at a Baby Diego memorial, and how much more despair has set in because they had that hope, because they were sticking it in the wrong place in him, but they were still putting their hope in something, and so that allowed for a greater fall because they had that. And so that's not the hope that this movie gives. It's actually Key and her child, but it's interesting to see that there, that and also you see that in the fishes, that they've put all of their hope in this new child, and that's justifiable. But it's also for their not just for humanity, but for their cause.
Power,
for their
dynamic,
cause, that they're, and when they lose her, they just go nuts and then start off a chain, like a whole war chain of events that happen. And
well, I think too, in a lot of these types of works of fiction, I think there's a certain character motivation that hope plays, and I think for the audience, to a certain extent, I think we all want to think of ourselves as being hopeful. Like we would want to be survivors in whatever, whenever we talk about the zombie apocalypse, we always cast ourselves as a survivor.
Right, we'd figure it out some way.
We would figure it out. There's hope. And so I think for the main character of a work like this to have something to hope for there to be hope present in that character, especially his life, I think that gives the audience something to latch onto, because in some ways, it almost seems to me like we're wired to hope.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's why it's relatable. All the people there in the coffee house, it's relatable to see their reaction, because they're just grasping for anything at this point, trying to hope in anything that something could change. I really like the lessons from the screenplay. He does this great. He actually looks at both Logan, the movie Logan, and this movie back to back, and talking about how the character arc that Theo goes through, and in Logan Wolverine goes through, and how they're constantly being lied to at the beginning, and that the movie is about breaking down that lie in order for them to come to the truth that they need to have. And for Theo, the truth is that there is hope, because he's a character at the beginning who has lost his marriage, who has lost his child, who he says to Michael Caine, what's his name, Jasper again, he says that the world was falling apart before the infertility. He said it was already too late before that. He has a very pessimistic attitude, and the characters around him don't make him change that either. Jasper just helps him medicate because he's a drunk and he's getting high with Jasper. Jasper has lost his love because she was tortured in the past.
Yeah.
Also, his cousin he goes to is
that guy. Yeah, his expressing that I just don't think about how everything's going to pot. Yeah,
they're both enablers basically, and you hate to, because Jasper is such a great character later. I hate to say this about him right now, but he's like an enabler for him to stay, for Theo to stay in where he is, but his cousin as well is, I don't think about it. I'm just hiding. I'm hiding away here in my ark, while the whole world crumbles around me, and I'm just not going to think about it. And it's funny too, because his son, there's something wrong with his son, and he's got like tats and scars on him, and which to me sounds like something bad happened to him as well that made him that way, which is very interesting when you think of him and Jasper, because they both have, it's like all three characters have lost something, and so they're all stuck in the past and stunted, and also he doesn't at the beginning. This is in the lessons from the screenplay video. It's really great. He leaves the coffee house because he doesn't care. He looks up at the screen, baby Diego, who cares? I don't have any hope in anything anyway. He leaves the coffee house, and what happens? The people who did care got blown up. Yeah. Which just reinforces that to him that what he's doing is fine, and he's surviving the way he should be.
Yeah. Wow.
But then of course that is all stripped away from him when he sees the possibility of redemption in a child, which is very personal for him because he lost a child. And so I love that idea that his hope is he's not just a random character that's like, I'm going to save humanity. It's also bringing about hope back in him that's very personal because he failed to save his own child. And this is a way of him redeeming that in himself, not just the world, but for his own spiritual, and emotional core. Yeah. Yeah. So I think hope has to be, I feel like it has to be.
Well, a lot of my favorite works, one that we haven't mentioned yet, Brazil, is a film by Terry Gilliam, which is set in what I would call a dystopia, kind of an authoritarian state, similar to what we see here. The world it doesn't seem like it has fallen apart quite as much, and there's not maybe as much hopelessness as there is in Children of Men, but still there's this oppressive bureaucracy that kind of works to stunt your freedom and individualism. And so the main character in that is throughout he's imagining and hopeful, and you see kind of his dream sequences set against the reality that he's living in, and those two things playing against each other really, you are hoping along with the main character through Brazil, even though he actually has a pretty hopeless story.
Interesting. I haven't seen that.
Yeah, well, we'll have to add that to the list.
Definitely.
I'm huge Terry Gilliam film. By the way, he also basically remade it in the film The Zero Theorem. If you're going to watch one of the two...
I've heard that one, yeah.
Watch Brazil.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, again, I'm a huge Gilliam fan, so watch everything that Terry Gilliam's made. He actually has a pretty small body of work because he can't get funding, so that's the constant... And he picks projects that investors aren't going to get behind, and he's making them for himself, and he has such a unique perspective that I'm sure producers are just like, I don't know what to do. Oh, this is is this all going horribly awry? So.
Well, that's what when Alfonso Cuarón pitched this to producers, they had no idea what to make of it. When he said, "This is what I want," they're like, we don't get this, but here we'll.
Yeah, so
but it was after Potter.
Are the filmmakers
got it
in these situations that come up with these stories? Are they the hero? Like, do they picture themselves as the protagonist? Like they are the hopeful person in this world that's just trying to crush them.
That Hollywood is the oppressor.
The story of Brazil is 100% that. It sounds like for Cuarón, he had experienced some of that as well.
I also like the idea that the idea of hope is is based on faith, and this goes back to the religious symbolism in the movie, that there's a lot of people taking things on faith, and how that plays into what their actions are.
Jasper has a really interesting conversation about faith and chance.
Yeah.
In describing, I love
And
even
the
the way
dichotomy
that
and
that
how
sequence,
they
the way
play
it's
off
even
each other.
shot. That you're kind of like Theo is sort of the foreground of the focus, and it's almost like a conversation that's happening in the background.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, talking about how Theo had faith and that chance hit in the form of the flu epidemic that took Dylan away, and the conflict between those two things.
Right.
Yeah.
And so along with the hope of the future, his faith was dashed as well. And so he lost it as well. And I like the idea that at the end, when they go out to see, he has a little faith that they know they have contacts with the Human Project because he's hearing them talk about it. But then the midwife says, "Oh, we haven't talked to them," and he starts freaking out. He's like, "Are you kidding me? You haven't spoken to them at all?"
This. Yeah.
And she's like, "No, we used mirrors, and I never had contact," and so he still goes forward. And I love at the end he dies before he never sees the boat.
Yeah.
He because he has his back to it, he keels over, and then the boat comes, and so he took her as far as he could on faith, and that faith for him wasn't rewarded. He doesn't see the ship coming to save her, and I liked that idea of it. That
and to be real, I think that picture of faith is actually maybe a better picture of faith than even what we get sometimes in like Christian media. Because a lot of times in Christian media, if somebody has faith in something, then the Christian media has to show like, oh, look, everything just worked out, and the character sees it, and there's the Newsboys concert where everything just is magical and wonderful and works together. And I think a lot of times in our experiences, especially whenever we're in the midst of situations that do seem hopeless, and we're experiencing our own kind of personal dystopias, I think it's easy for us to lose hope, in that we find hope in faith, and that we may not see the full picture of even what's going on, and there is a lot of uncertainty that even the most faithful will potentially have to live with. I mean, well, and that's for multiple characters, for Jasper, for the midwife, for even Chutel Ejiofor's character. I forget his name. Even though he's an antagonist, he thinks he's doing the right thing, and then he is taken away, and he doesn't see the fulfillment either in what he was placing his faith in. And so that's several times in the movie. Julianne Moore's character.
Julianne Moore as well. Yeah, she didn't reach the end as well of what she was trying to accomplish. But all these people along the way, basically taking up the baton, got a key to where she needed to be. And that is very different for cinema, that a lot of times we want our main characters to not only see the fulfillment, but to experience the good that comes afterward. Because at the end of the movie, the title comes up and you hear children's laughter again, which Cuarón has gone on record and said, because people are like, oh, is that ship, is anything saved? It's a cliffhanger. And he's like, I never meant it to be a cliffhanger. That they are, the tomorrow is the Human Project. She does get to them. And then you hear children's laughter at the end. He's like, I was intentional about, the world is saved there. But those characters don't get to see that. They don't get to experience the fruits of that afterward and receive the benefit of it either. And so, it's a tragedy in those ways, but it also is super uplifting at the end that their sacrifices meant something. Yeah. Why do you think modern audiences gravitate to these stories more? Like us right now, because I'm going to read...
Why is it so popular now? Why is this...
let me read just a few movies that have come out that a lot of these are based on popular dystopian literature.
Okay.
They're adaptations. Hunger Games, Man in the High Castle, Walking Dead, Fahrenheit 451, The Handmaid's Tale, Maze Runner, Ready Player One, V for Vendetta, Mad Max, Minority Report, Equilibrium, The Matrix, Blade Runner. some of these are not based on literature, but a lot of them are on existing written properties. But all of these have come out in the early 21st century, and a lot of them in the last couple of years. Even there's been just a big influx of them lately.
Yeah, there's so much uncertainty in the world. I think that communicates to that.
Mm-hmm. How much? I was listening to Gary K. Wolfe, and he put forward: are the youth of today, are they more cynical in looking at their reality? Are they more cynical than what generations of the past have been, like, or even us when we were in high school? Because I think about like social media and standards, like the standard of conforming that is very prevalent in culture, of everyone getting on one side or the other on issues, education, standardization, like authoritarian governments and shifts and things like that. How much is this playing into our thinking and relating to these topics?
I mean, it's hard to speak for the world. For the United States and like our culture, I definitely think there's some scary trends right now that could lead a person to kind of a pretty hopeless end, actually. So I'm sure, and the funny thing is, I think all of us identify with the heroes of the dystopia, even though maybe sometimes we're actually the ones, like the antagonists, we're the ones fueling the fire,
right?
You know, and the tribalism and all of those types of things.
Right.
I think there's a tendency, you know, whenever
the idea of I have the solution, but is your solution the right solution, or will it push things further down the line of where it's going? Yeah. What warnings are given in Children of Men, and does our world heed these warnings right now?
That's interesting. Going back to Jasper's conversation about not losing faith, I think there are a lot of people who are faithless actors in the world. I think a lot of people have lost that, and some people like willfully, and other people just because the world can tread on you pretty hard. You know, I have several friends who have gone through some really difficult times, and I think the importance of not losing faith, and then in that also enjoying life as a treasure. Like, I think the film definitely portrays, you know, I love the sequence of Key carrying her baby through a hall of armed military men, and it all just stops.
Right. And
it's like, oh, this conflict that we have is secondary to the value that life has, you know, specifically this life. But, and you know, and the cool thing to me about this work, and I feel like Jasper embodies this, but you know, even whenever they're on the car ride and they're playing the game with ping pong balls and they're laughing and talking, like there is so much richness in life. And sometimes in the parts of I'm speaking somewhat out of experience. I recently have had some uncertainty about, you know, several things, and it's easy to be hopeless and even to stop enjoying things. You know, there have been a few nights in the midst of it where, you know, I've gone home and I'm not enjoying spending time with my son, or, you know, where I'm feeling chest pains because of the stress that I'm under. And I think Children of Men encourages us to take those things, the life that we have, and really appreciate it for what it is and for the time that we have it, because we don't have certainty.
Right. It's easy when you've been hurt, and when things have fallen apart in your life, it's easy to close up and just let the darkness envelop you and just live in it. And that's what the character Theo is doing at the beginning. To just let it be, and almost
it's a miserable, worthless experience.
Yeah. When you accept that, and you can see it, he's constantly drinking. He's doing anything he can, basically, not to be thinking about his situation.
Yeah. Well, and that even makes me think about, you know, like the opiate issue that is going on right now.
Yeah.
And just the number of people who are medicating themselves to get through their lives. It speaks to a lot of hopelessness in people who don't see any value in their experience and are just medicating to get through it.
Yeah. I think this movie is also talking about how we can allow ourselves to become callous to both hate and love. I think it talks about both, that you see how humanity who has let the darkness envelop them and not allowed themselves to hope, to get, when they close themselves off. I mean, it's not even figurative. It's the country itself has closed. They've decided to close itself off to the rest of the world. Yeah. And anyone who comes in is hunted down and put in cages. That they're doing that physically, but it's a metaphor of, closing yourself off to everything and becoming callous, and not letting, the world touch you. I like the imagery. There's at one point where they're driving. I think when he and Jasper are driving out to the house at the first point, you see a field where there's cattle burning, like turned upside down, and they're burnt. And then right after that, I may have the sequence of events wrong, but then they're passed by the refugees that are just caged like cattle right there. And so it's almost like a foreshadowing of this is what is to come. And then later, Key is in the barn, and she is a refugee. And what is she? She's sitting. She's standing around cattle. Yeah. And so I was like, that again, very intentional. Of, this is a world that's very callous and treating people, in that way, because it has experienced a hurt. It has experienced this sorrow. And so it's not allowing itself to have its humanity, basically.
There's that saying that hurting people hurt people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it can be very easy whenever we experience difficulty to turn inward. And this piece, I think, calls us out of that.
Mm-hmm. But I like the reverse of that as well, that it is also talking about don't be callous to allowing for love as well. Like we shouldn't be callous to hate, like seeing it, because that's what Theo's doing. He's walking through the streets and he sees all these hurting people and he just doesn't care. But also he doesn't care to be loved either. His ex-wife comes back and he's almost he's happy to see her, but doesn't seem like they have a future. Still, they don't have a future with their interactions together. He's completely closed off to her, and then through the movie he allows Key to open his heart up. And for him, I think he loves her, not in a romantic sense, but in a he wouldn't be risking.
Well, in some ways, in a greater way, that he lays down his life,
right,
for that. He's
opened
that is the
himself.
Greatest form of love, to be willing to sacrifice yourself for someone.
Exactly. He's opened himself up to another in order to risk his life for her. Yeah. Oh, and then even like the quietus suicide that's been packaged and given out to the whole United Kingdom is people not loving themselves, that they don't see any value in themselves anymore, that they're willing to get on with it and be done with it. I also think there's a warning of there's the idea of not putting the issues of today off till tomorrow. I think that's very much in this piece of both environmental, economic, social issues that need to be dealt with, because in this film the future is dashed from these people. So all the problems that were already here have just become magnified because people don't care anymore, and they've given up on it. And so I like that idea of, we're already heading down this road, but we oftentimes like to think of the next, or at least we fall back on the next generation will figure it out. Like we pass the buck on to who's coming next of, we'll try our best, but really someone else down the road, this will be inherited to them. And sometimes we're supposed to think about leaving the world better than what we found it, but oftentimes it's, especially I feel like in America, we treat so much as a commodity because we're very much a commodity focused culture of
totally
gimme, what can I use and then dispose of when I'm done with it. So what any other peripheral themes, any focuses that you think that this work has?
No, those, I think we've pretty well covered the stuff that I saw and really kind of enjoyed and appreciated from the work.
I like the last time I watched it, I was just thinking about it and doing some stuff on my phone, and I'd let the credits roll. At the very end, after the credits, the mantra of Shanti, Shanti, Shanti comes up right at the end. And so it's funny because you have the children laughing and playing when the title card comes up at the end. Then you have all of the credits, and then you hear the children again at the end. They bring that audio back up after all the credits and says Shanti, 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 which is said a couple different times in the movie by different characters, which is it's a Hindu prayer of peace, and it's used in end rituals and mantras, but it's means peace, calm, and removing obstacles, both physical and spiritual. And so they say it as a mantra like that. But I thought it was interesting. It's also at the very end of The Wasteland, of T.S. Eliot's poem, The Wasteland, which was written his response to the modern world post World War I. And his thinking on the world now, which is funny because that's the beginning of the dystopian, around there's the beginning of dystopian era, which I liked. Once again, I feel like that is intentional, that is another throwback art focus in this film that was intentionally put in. But the idea of peace, that this is a dystopian movie, like a view of the future, but at the end it still has the optimistic utopian like dream of the future of peace, of rest, of well,
like we said earlier, when everybody dies and there are no people, that's and
then the world is at peace.
Then the world is at peace. So in at least this situation with a new generation starting back at 1.
Yeah. Well, like in the world that they inherit, that would be,
it's fresh, it's new.
Yeah. No, not not really. Not yeah. That would be, obviously this piece will stand alone. There will never be, I don't think there will
I don't
ever
want
be.
a sequel to it.
No.
Yeah.
But it's nice to think, it's interesting to think about what would this world be in another 20 years.
The children of men.
Right. Children of men. Yeah. But the CGI children of men.
Yep.
That's CGI.
That is, man, what a convincing CGI baby. Let me tell you.
CGI baby. Well, I think that this wraps up our talking on Children of Men. Any last thoughts on this before we go?
No, I was really glad that we tackled this. You suggested it, and I was like, what is this? And then I watched it, I'm like, oh, this is pretty good.
It was another one that they dropped on streaming, and I was like, man, I haven't seen this in a long time. Let me give it another watch. And I'm a lot more mature than when I watched it the first time. And so I got a lot more out of it, and I was just like, "This is incredible." And I had heard as much that it's one of the best. There's people who say that it is one of the top 5 films of the 21st century of any genre. That they put that much stock into this film, and I don't think they're wrong. I think it's an incredible work.
I really enjoyed Gravity. So Prisoner of Azkaban, which Cuarón directed, I enjoyed. And Gravity, I really enjoyed a lot as a suspense film. The setting, we haven't really talked about it. It'd be a great
That's
worth
one
to visit later.
That's one that I have seen, but I need to go back and watch again because I remember I liked it.
Yeah.
I remember Sandra Bullock did an awesome job visually. It looked incredible.
And
Goodness,
so it was
so good.
nice to get to expand, just seeing more of his works. I'm excited for the next piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what are we tackling next then?
Nick, several episodes ago, you shared something. It was more of a sentiment in the way that you said something than so much just being outright with it. And I think we need to take this to the mat. I think we've got to we need to throw down on Revenge of the Sith.
The worst prequel movie.
The best prequel movie. I think that Revenge of the Sith belongs right alongside your other Star Wars movies on your shelf and treated with largely the same regard. It belongs
on the shelf in chronological order because it's supposed to be there, but
because I'm willing to chuck Phantom Menace for sure. And typically whenever I watch the series, I'll watch it in machete order. So I'm okay with 2 where it fits in there. But I actually, in rewatching the series with my wife probably a year or 2 ago, Revenge of the Sith is one of her favorites. Like and Return of the Jedi are her favorite films. And I understand why. And so I am excited to throw down with you and...
Well, everyone listening to this is going to disagree with me, I'm sure, right now. But we will, yeah. So we're going to throw down. We're going to argue about this next time.
Next time, we are going to settle. I feel like a lot of people think Revenge of the Sith is good, and we're going to settle.
I know most people think it is the best of the prequels, but there's just things about it that I get under my skin and I hate, and that they bother me so much. I don't rewatch it as much as I do the other prequels. I will watch.
What?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
All right. You know what?
That is part of the
Next
argument.
Episode.
Is that there's things about it that I can't do because.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And I will watch the other ones more than that because of these reasons.
This is ridiculous. I don't even know that I can continue this show.
Well, we need to cut it off here and save the argument for that, because if I go too much more, I will just get into it right now with you. But yeah, so next episode we're going to be tackling Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
The best of the prequels.
The worst of the prequels. And we'll have it out and have a definitive answer on that, I guess, at the end of it. But, all right. Well, you can always catch us here on YouTube and in any feed that you're on. And as always, thank you for joining us at the Dead Padawan Society. We appreciate your support and feedback. So please like and share this episode with a friend. If you can leave a comment on social media or email us at the Dead Padawan Society at gmail.com.
Yep.
We'd really appreciate it. We'd love to interact with you.
Well, and we've actually gotten to interact with a few people, which has been really cool.
Have we now? We got some
Well,
email?
I got to interact with people. Evidently, you
I haven't checked it. I haven't looked at it. So you've got some feedback.
Yeah, we're encouraging you to engage with us either on social media. We've got Facebook. I know you've been monitoring Instagram.
And Twitter, any of those.
Share with us who's a fan of ours on Instagram now, or a follower.
Who's that? Who was it? I forget.
You said, was it the team that did the...
Oh, the Raiders guys. Yeah. We went to see there's these guys, if you don't know, who as kids remade Raiders of the Lost Ark as kids in basically with just their deaky camera equipment and just trying to remember the movie because you couldn't see it other than in the theaters. Anyway, they made it a complete adaptation of the film, and it is incredible. That movie is incredible. And those guys tour around and they go to cons and stuff like that. Yeah, they follow like a ton of people, but
yeah, you said that afterwards. And I was like, what? This is cool. And then I was like, oh, this is less cool.
I was like, I really like them. They're awesome.
Oh, they absolutely are. Well, we even got to, I think we got a picture with one of the creators. So so you've been interacting with some people there. I've actually gotten to interact with a few people on Facebook, and we've also gotten email. So
awesome.
People using everything there. Megan Brown listened to one of our early episodes. So at this point, we've aired 3 of our episodes, but listened to some of our early stuff and shared that she loved that we shouted out Westerns. I actually in probably the first episode was talking about the upcoming series at the Bell Court of Westerns, and I got to catch a Western at the same time as Megan, so she's a friend of ours and a listener to the show.
Oh, you went to the same screening
yeah,
as her?
Yeah,
Oh, cool.
So, but yeah, she shared that, and then as a result of her sharing that, I went ahead and asked her about one of the things she liked was the game we played with sci-fi definitions.
Oh, okay.
And so we kind of talked about that a little bit, and she said that her answer to everything was Godzilla, I think. So I really loved that.
Godzilla, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we also have gotten some email from Kason Anderson, who we work with, because, our friends are the only people who listen to us. But he shot us an email, and in talking about blind spots that we have, some things that he didn't hear us mention, but he feels like are blind spots that would definitely be worth checking out. The Expanse.
Yeah, that's one I keep running into, hearing great things about.
Fringe. Stargate.
I've watched a ton of Stargate.
Have you? See,
Yeah.
I've seen sporadic bits and pieces, but yeah, that's definitely
That
one.
was another big one that
Yeah.
I watched with my dad, like, because TNG went off and it was just reruns. But then Stargate came on in, the late 90s, early 2000s, and it had two spin-off series, and we watched some of those too.
I love that he also said, we called out the fact that our sci-fi video game knowledge is very minimal. But one of the works that he recommended was Mass Effect, which, even though I've not played it, I've heard a lot about, and so that actually may be something that we need to tackle, because it definitely looks great.
I enjoy the people who put together all the cutscenes of games so that you just get the narrative of it, and you can just watch like an hour and a half or 2 hours, and they put in, people who do it well will put in a little bit of play so you can understand the objectives that have happened and in the play, and so you know why you're now to this next cutscene. And some people do it really well, and I enjoy watching those because I'm not a big gamer, but if it's a good story and it's got something to tell, I'd love to watch it.
Yeah. So that would be one that we'll have to check out at some point. So really appreciate Megan and Kason reaching out to us after listening to the episodes. We definitely want this to be a community that we're interacting with.
And I love suggestions. Any suggestion of a work or an idea topic we can talk about, we'd love to send those on, or any feedback we appreciate.
Yeah, so check us out on social media, or again at deadpadawanssociety@gmail.com, and we'll shout you out or shoot you a response back. We just love getting the chance to interact with you about sci-fi.
And if you're going to be at the ICC Con here in Nashville, Tennessee, coming up soon, maybe you can see us there.
In the past, from the time this episode aired.
Oh, that's true. Well, we've already seen you. Thanks. It was great to see you.
Yeah, it was great to see you there.
Shout out to you, that person that we met and had a great conversation.
You were a cool person.
Yeah. We'll get back together sometime. Don't worry. All right. As always, thank you for listening. May the force be with you.
And live long and prosper.
Bye.